Welcome to the Fight Like a Mother podcast. I am Cheryl Cardall, your host. You have landed in a wonderful community where we give non-judgmental support for parents raising kids with mental health and other neurodiverse challenges. My main goal is to provide resources and especially a soft place to land. Go find me on Instagram and join our awesome community of parents under my name, Cheryl Cardall. Now on with the episode. Hello, my friends. This is episode 89 of the Fight Like a Mother podcast. And this is actually a little bonus episode that I'm sharing for the month of January, just because there's been lots of things that have made me think in the last week. And I wanted to share some of those ideas with you. So this last week on Instagram, we've been chatting a lot in our community about the latest episode, episode 88, which is entitled When Parenting is Traumatic. If you haven't listened to that, I highly recommend it. It has some really deep, profound truths, and it's also validating and super comforting to those of us raising kids with big challenges and extra needs. Before I go on, though, I want to say a few words about raising these kids. I had some pushback on this episode that people felt like calling parenting traumatic is not okay. They didn't like that phrase, and that they felt like it was taking away from seeing our kids for the wonderful, beautiful human beings that they are and the unique qualities that they possess, and that we can't say it's difficult. But to me, that screams toxic positivity. Shoving down those traumatic and difficult things that happen, it doesn't help us love our kids better. In fact, I think it actually can create resentment toward them, because we don't acknowledge it. And that stuff always comes out sideways. It comes out in other ways. We hold it in our bodies, and it's not healthy for us. And it's not healthy with our relationship with our kids. Now, we don't have to blame our kids and say they're the perpetrator of the trauma and that we're the victim. That's not what I'm saying. I love my kids who have struggles with all of my heart. They are incredible humans, and we go through these traumatic experiences together. It's just part of our journey together. So it gets to be both, which is one of my favorite phrases, that we get to go through these experiences together, and there is some trauma with it. And we can love them with all of our hearts and see their beautiful qualities and have nurturing relationships with them. So they're not doing this to us. We're going through this experience together. I think by removing the shame attached, that we can even admit that parenting can be traumatic, and acknowledging it, and we give ourselves permission to feel it, and that it can affect our mental and our physical health, I think it's really healthy, actually. And I think it's a really important step to begin healing. So in order to heal, in order to deal with this stuff, we have to name it, right? There's that phrase, we have to name it to tame it. Some other phrases I can think of are, we feel it all, and then we take the wheel. Like, we have to feel it, process it, whatever, and then we get in the driver's seat and we determine what happens from there. But we can't do that if we don't acknowledge it and name it. We feel, we deal, and then we heal. So those are all phrases that I've heard lots of times that resonate with me. We can't heal what we don't name. So shoving it away because we feel shameful about it, it doesn't help anyone. So this week I shared some graphics of studies that have been published regarding mostly moms who are raising kids with autism. They're on the autism spectrum. And these can translate over to kids with other neurodivergent diagnoses, but there's just been more studies done on parents of kids with autism. So that's what I focused on. But the first one was, as a result of caring for their child, nearly 1 in 5 parents of children living with autism spectrum disorder who participated in a study had enough symptoms to qualify for a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder. Another one is a study by the University of Wisconsin followed mothers of children and adults with autism and found that the stress hormone cortisol in them are very similar in levels to that found in combat soldiers. The chronic stress can make mothers vulnerable to issues like cardiovascular disease, weakened immune systems, fatigue, and insomnia. Parents at the greatest risk were those whose children displayed intensely challenging behaviors which are not socially acceptable, including loud and vulgar screaming, intense meltdowns, self-harm, suicidal attempts, and physical aggression. So those are some of the stats that I shared, and those are pretty telling, right? PTSD. Literally, we're warrior moms. We have trauma comparable to that of a combat soldier. So we have to say it. We have to be real with it. And those are studies that have been replicated over and over in different settings. So if you are a fan of my podcast, if you are a parent of a kid with intense extra needs, chances are you have some trauma. And trauma isn't the event that happens. It's the lasting effect on us, on our nervous systems, on our bodies. And we don't have any control over how that affects us. So someone else, you could be in a car accident with somebody, let's say you're in a really serious car accident with someone, and you experience severe trauma and flashbacks and constant triggers, and the person next to you doesn't have those triggers, and you wonder, what is wrong with me? Well, guess what? You had no control over your body's response to that trauma. Even a witness of the car accident could have secondary trauma that could be a bigger traumatic experience than the person next to you in the car. Remember, it's not the event or the intensity of the event, it's the effect it has on us and on our nervous systems and on our bodies. So acute trauma is resulting trauma from a one-time event, like a car accident, okay? Chronic trauma is repeated and prolonged, which I'm guessing a lot of the listeners here have in their homes. Complex trauma is exposure to varied and multiple traumatic events, and that is often happens in childhood. If you are abused or neglected or sexually assaulted, or, it's a multitude of those traumas that build up and up and up, and that's complex trauma. So almost everyone on earth has experienced trauma. In fact, I would say everyone has experienced trauma of some type. The trauma, like we said, isn't the event. What we're concerned about is how it's affecting your ability to function, to show up in your relationships, if it's affecting your physical and your mental health. So I asked a question on Instagram for people to answer if they wanted to about what kind of trauma they had seen in their homes. It was anonymous, and by sharing in the question, they knew that I would share their responses. And I got dozens of responses. Dozens. And some people said, please don't share this. I just wanted to say it to somebody. People want to speak their truth. Speaking our unspeakable is healing. It opens it up so it's not quite so heavy. These experiences were heartbreaking. And I felt like I was actually walking on sacred ground as people shared their unspeakable truths. I'm so honored they felt like they could share those with me. We need to have space to speak our unspeakables because carrying them feels so heavy and it weighs us down. So some of these devastating experiences ranged from multiple suicide attempts to run-ins with police to a teen cracking a glass door with his head to get the mental anguish to stop, to cutting, to failing school, etc. Lots and lots of different experiences. Parents also chimed in with what they wish people knew about the journeys, and some of these answers were, "We're not making this up. We are good parents struggling with lack of resources and support, and we are so exhausted and doing the best we can." And so those answers with what our community wished people knew are what I want to talk about. Guess what? Those are trauma responses. Those pleas to be heard, to have others believe them, that we are good parents, even if our kids struggle, that we are doing the very best we can and are completely and totally exhausted. That is trauma. And so much of our trauma raising these kids can come due to society's expectations put on parents. It's so interesting, that stat that said the parents who have the most trauma are the ones whose kid had unacceptable behavior in society. Okay, so we have those options, or we have those behaviors that come out, and it must be a problem with us. So let's talk about some of society's expectations. So good parents don't have kids that misbehave. Good moms don't say that their kids are causing mental health issues. Good parents have good kids who do good things. Good parents know how to handle and control their children. Good parents have kids who graduate high school and graduate with honors and scholarships and all the things. So I'm going to share an experience with you that actually is one of my more painful experiences in life. After one of my son's suicide attempts, we were told by somebody that that his suicide attempt and all of the events leading up to the attempt and his behaviors and his defiance and all of that, it was our fault. And if we were better parents, if we were more in control and his behaviors, then this suicide attempt wouldn't have happened. I'm recording, but go. What do you need? Okay, Dad can edit that out. So, I'll just start that paragraph over. After one of our son's suicide attempts, which is one of the more painful experiences you can have in parenting, and there were lots of things that led up to that attempt, and they were equally as difficult, I want to say. And our son was really struggling. And somebody fairly close to us told us that it was all our fault. That if we'd been better parents, if we'd been more in control of him, if we'd had tougher love, then he would not have had this suicide attempt. That this was all our fault. Do you know what comes up in my brain when he has those struggles now? Do you know how hard and painful that was to hear those words? It was so painful in such a vulnerable time. So when he continues to have struggles, guess what goes through my brain? Those exact words. If I was a better mom, he wouldn't have these struggles. If I was a better mom, then we could control this. If I was a better mom, he wouldn't have dropped out of high school. I hear those exact words. But you know what? It's bull crap. And logically, I know that it is. But part of the trauma is those beliefs and those expectations. They pile on. They pile on the heap of our already impossibly heavy trauma. So what do? Can you see how these beliefs and expectations and judgments that society has adopted and that they say to us can be harmful? How those cause trauma and add heaps and heaps and heaps onto our trauma? Our beliefs about what a good parent means is actually harmful and can be traumatic. Those beliefs can come from family of origin, society at large, churches, schools, neighbors, family members, etc. So I saw a quote this week that said, "Good moms create safe and happy homes." And I have been thinking about it ever since. I cannot get it out of my mind, because what happens when my home isn't safe and happy? Because it happens. What does it mean about me that my home isn't the refuge? It's not safe and happy. That my other kids are experiencing trauma. What is deficient about me that I can't be in control and create this safe and happy environment? So this was one of my biggest struggles. I was raised to be a mom. And that is a good thing. Like, I'm so grateful to be a mom. So grateful for my 5 kids. Wouldn't trade it at all. But some of the beliefs that I was raised with, some of the culture I absorbed into my mind, have actually been really harmful. And so I need to talk about that. So I was taught that motherhood was the highest, holiest calling. It was next to divinity. I was taught to aspire to it, that it would fulfill me and complete me and all of that, okay? That it was my job. I had the ability to control whether this space that I'm raising my kids in was happy and healthy. That I could create this refuge. That I would raise kids that were kind and generous and didn't swear and went to church and, all these things. You know what? Sometimes my home looks far from a refuge and a safe place. In fact, often my home looks completely 100% different than I ever expected it to look. And that's hard. That loss of expectation of what your life's going to look like can be traumatic. So being a mom is my greatest joy. I wouldn't trade being a mom. I wouldn't trade my kids for anything. Now, mental illness can go take a hike, but that's part of our journey. So while it's my greatest joy, it's also my biggest challenge. It's what keeps me awake at night. It's what's causing me to ruin my teeth through clenching them. It is a much more difficult journey than I ever expected. And it gets to be both. It gets to be our greatest joy and our biggest challenge. So what do I make it mean about me as a mom and as a person that all of my effort to create a beautiful, safe home, it's not. Sometimes it's traumatic. Sometimes it's hard. Well, often it's hard. But sometimes it's kind of scary. What does that say about me? What am I making that mean? So often I've absorbed those beliefs that a good mom can create happiness and beauty and safety and has that control. So then what does it mean about me? I must be a bad mom because I can't do that. A bad mom is me. I'm not capable of doing what I should. I can't control my kids. I should try harder. I should, and I should all over myself. And then I'm no good to anybody. So then I'm operating in my motherhood relationships from a place of scarcity and fear. So that affects my interactions with my kids. I'm anxious I'm not doing anything right. So either I shut down and don't interact, or I go to a place of more control, more punishment, etc. I get louder. I tend to overreact. But those don't work either. So then I get disappointed in myself because I'm not being the mom that I know I can be. And I'm feeling other people's disappointments and judgments of my family. And those pile on over and over and over again. You guys, that is trauma. How do we heal? How do we stop the shoulds from driving the car? How do we stop that piling on of people's expectations and judgments and all of that, adding to our already heavy trauma? We can't control what they think, of their misconceptions, of us and our kids. We can't control their judgments. So what do we do? I recently did an interview with an amazing woman about advocacy. And she said something that stuck with me. She said, we as parents need to be the shield between our kids and the world. We need to be made of Teflon so nothing sticks. We need to not worry about what people think. We need to do our own work so the judgments and perceptions of others and those expectations slide off of us so we are an effective advocate for our kids. So how do we apply that to ourselves? Because we can apply that to us. It's easier to do it for our kids than it is for us. It's easier for me to stand up for my kid and say, this child needs this, or that is not how this is going to look, or things like that. But it's harder to do for myself. How do we put that shield up between us and others' judgments? One of the judgments, or one of the mantras I've adopted, which has really helped me, is that people don't know what they don't know. They have not raised your child. They have not been in your circumstances. And even though they might think they know what they would do, and they think they know what would be best for your family, and they think they know how to control a child, they don't. They don't know because they're not in your circumstances. Their judgments are about them, not us. I think that's really important, that what they think of you and your kid, that's none of your business. None ya. It's none ya business. So that's not easy to do. So what are some things that we can do? Here's some steps that I have taken through therapy, through reading, through becoming more confident myself, that I've learned how to become a shield, how to be made of Teflon. First off, please, please, please give yourself tons of compassion and grace. You are in a really difficult situation. You don't have enough support. You don't have enough resources. And please know that you're not a perfect parent, but nobody is. Nobody is a perfect parent. We're not supposed to be. And this is not your fault. So a friend of mine who has a son that struggles with some mighty struggles said this to me years ago. And please excuse the swearing, but it does not have the same effect if I don't use the swear word. So here we go. She said to me, Cheryl, there are a lot shittier parents in the world than you and I. And their kids are somehow thriving. They're getting straight A's. They're getting into their dream college. They're going on church missions. It's not us. It's the struggles. So I think about that all the time. Hey, there's a lot shittier parents than me out there, and their kids are thriving. So it's not me. This is not my fault. We don't need to take the blame or the credit for our kids' choices, actions, struggles, etc. We don't need to make it about us. It's not about us. And guess what? It's not about them either. It's not about our kids either. This is not their fault either. We can just accept that the struggles are what's causing these challenges, not us, not our kids. Okay? So first, give yourself compassion and grace. Second, let's work on shifting the beliefs. What are you making this mean about you? And is it true? Okay, so let's take the fact that my son has dropped out of high school. Okay? Is it true that I'm a bad parent because my kid dropped out of school? First of all, I'm going to validate my feelings. You know what? It feels like that. It does feel like that because society has taught me that good, involved parents have kids who succeed in school. So I must not be a good parent. But guess what? What's the truth? The truth is, I'm an involved and intentional parent. Yes, I am. I was in those schools all the time. I was getting all the supports and helps that we could get. So you know what? It's not true because I was a super involved parent. Another thing to examine is, do I believe my child is a bad kid because they failed at school? Maybe deep down you do, because maybe grades were this super important measure of what quality kids look like or parents look like. Maybe there was so much value placed on those letter grades that maybe deep down you do think there's something wrong with your child because they failed. And so there must be something wrong with you. You're judging your child about the grades, and then in turn you're judging yourself on some random letter on a piece of paper. So what am I making it mean about you? If you're using your kids' grades as a measure of you as a parent, what's that doing? Is that helping you? Is your son dropping out of high school? Does that mean that you must be a terrible mother? Okay, let's focus on the facts here. One thing that helped me so much is one of my podcast guests, Dr. Brad Reedy, told me before we interviewed that he was a high school dropout. And now he has a PhD. Because I think we have this notion, and we're told over and over, that the only way to be successful is to graduate from high school in the traditional way, when they're 18 years old, that they are doomed for a life of no success, that they're going to live in poverty, that they're going to do all these things. And when Dr. Reedy told me that, I was like, oh my gosh, there are more paths to success than graduating in the traditional way in high school. And you know what? After I talked to Dr. Reedy, I talked to 3 or 4 other people who are really successful human beings in life who were dropouts. And I would never think anything less of their parents because they dropped out of high school. So what the actual truth is that instead of it meaning a failure of me or my child, maybe the system failed us. Maybe we don't have the supports. Maybe it was actually good for my child's mental health to drop out of school because it was a constant source of trauma. Okay? My kids don't need my judgment. They don't need me piling my own trauma and my own untrue beliefs on them. And so it's so important to work through. So there's a framework that you can work on, shifting some beliefs. What are you making it mean about you? Is it actually true? What is the actual truth? And you may need to dig really deep into some of those deep-seated ideas. Other people, they are allowed to have their opinions and beliefs about that. And you don't need to change their mind. That's not your job. We don't need to fix it. We don't need to prove ourselves to them. Let them have their little untrue opinions about you and move on and focus on yourself and your child. They need you not to be listening to the noise outside of your home, to the untrue thoughts of others. Our kids need us to focus on them. We can let those go. We can shift our mindset. We can heal from those expectations and beliefs that we've taken on that are untrue. I just want you to know that the parents I work with and support and coach are truly some of the very most intentional, involved, loving warrior parents in the whole world. You cannot meet anyone that is more concerned for their child's well-being than these warrior parents that I work with. It is phenomenal. But guess what? They don't believe it because society's telling them that they must be crappy because their kid got kicked out of school, or their kid had a meltdown in the grocery store, or, they bit their friend. And so they're automatically labeled as the bad kid, and the bad kid must have a bad parent. And it's absolutely 100% untrue. Parents who are concerned about being a good parent, or that they're a bad parent, are good parents. You are incredible. Please don't let anyone, especially yourself, tell you differently, because you are remarkable. And I'm so grateful that I get to work with you and walk this journey right alongside you. I'm right in those trenches with you. We're warrior parents together. And we need to shed those unbeliefs about ourselves so that we can heal from that trauma, and that we can be more present for ourselves and for our other relationships, including the one with our kids. I also want to share with you that there is an exciting announcement coming up. Another resource for you that is going to be life-changing. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that. There will be learning, there will be resources, there will be community, and I cannot wait to announce it. It's coming in the next couple of weeks. So just stay tuned on my Instagram. I'll announce it here on the podcast as well. But I'm so excited about it. We've been working really hard on it, and it's coming up soon. Also, if you enjoy the podcast, if you wouldn't mind going and giving us a little 5-star review, and a few comments, that would be amazing. I also have a Patreon group that you can join and support the podcast. And also there's some really fun benefits too. So go check that out. I will put that in the show notes, and it's a community where we can gather. I'll do Q&As, and there will be special discounts and some special guests I'll bring on for some Q&As too. So go join my Patreon. Thank you so much for listening. I'll talk to you later.